There's no board at CETA, no permanent board. There's no permanent managing director since the beginning of the year. But we're saying this is an opportunity for the minister, for him to start in with a new leadership and fix things. He must do the work and not want to take shortcuts. Now, we're not saying we're opposed to EEIPs. We're saying that the law as it currently stands must be implemented. And if Minister Malatsi wants to then do away with the 30% in the ECA, then he should follow the correct route and come to Parliament to change laws. We are very resolute that we cannot have our sovereignty being undermined in this manner by a single company. You have a Centec that's sitting with 2 licenses. They don't need both. BBI is supposed to be the lead on the rollout of the SA Connect program. They don't even have a license.
Welcome to the latest edition of ITWeb TV. My name is Admaya Moyo. Today we are joined in the studio by the former spokesperson of President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is now the chairperson of the Parliamentary Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies. Welcome to ITWeb TV chairperson Khusela Sangoni-Diko.
Good morning, Admire, and thank you so much for having me here. Let me also greet your viewers. It truly is an honor to be with ITWeb.
Awesome. Yeah, we are quite excited to have you. I know we have been planning this for some time, but I'm so glad that you finally made it to our studio. So maybe just to start, chairperson, you are the chairperson of the Parliamentary Committee of Digital Technologies and Communications. If you can just let us know, what are you busy with at the moment?
Okay, thank you. And yeah, indeed, you were right when you said it's been a long time coming. I remember you were the first person that I called when I got appointed as chairperson. Like, Admire, what do you guys cover?
Yeah, I remember.
So I'm glad to be answering that question to you now. So the portfolio committee really plays oversight over 2 departments, one being the Government Communication and Information System, and the other one being the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. You'll know that the DCDT is quite a huge department that has over 13 entities, which would include amongst them entities such as the SABC, the Post Office, ICASA, Broadband Infraco, and so forth. In terms of our mandate, I think as Parliament, it's 3-pronged. So it's obviously lawmaking, which is our primary mandate. Then secondly, executive oversight, which is really ensuring that government does what it's supposed to do. And then finally, public participation, because that's ensuring that the voice of the people is heard in Parliament. And indeed, when we hold government to account, it's in their interests. We also do play oversight over the sector as a whole. So whether it is the original equipment manufacturers, whether it is the mobile network operators, whether it's the internet service providers, we do take a keen role. I think as this particular committee, we've told ourselves that we'll be both activist and interventionist in approach. We truly believe that gone are the days where Parliament sits in Cape Town, is elected once a year. People have no idea what we're doing. So we spend a lot of time, I think, in engagement, finding out what the issues are and obviously channeling them in the right direction. Your question was, what are we busy with right now?
Yes.
So we are going back into the 3rd term of Parliament from this coming Monday. And the very first thing that we're doing is to hold a strategic planning session.
Okay.
Which is a 2-day workshop where we are trying to refine the work of the committee in line with the mandate that I have just spoken to. One of the things that we are going to be looking at is what we are calling our legislative agenda. Being parliamentarians and being lawmakers, we think that Parliament has got a greater role to play, especially given the outdated legislation in our sector. So we're planning to have a look at that, and then obviously how we strengthen our oversight over the executive will be some of the issues discussed.
Awesome. Just to get back, like when you said I'm the first journalist that you called. When I got your call, I'm like, is this the real person? I had to confirm with my colleague Simniki, and he said, yeah, she is the right person. So thank you so much once again.
No. I have great respect for the publication. Thank you.
Awesome. Maybe also just looking at your roles, you used to be the spokesperson of the president. Now you are the chairing this committee. How have your roles evolved from time? Are you enjoying what you are doing now?
I am a lot. I am a lot. I suppose, to a large extent, the spokesperson role was about representing the president. So you spend a lot of time, obviously, understanding his thoughts, understanding policy, how that fits in, listening to the people, bringing it back to the president. And I think, just working in the private office was a huge honor and a privilege. What is different about this role is that we are now directly elected and we're expected to deliver on our own steam. So, I cannot, when I don't know what to say, I cannot then turn back and say, I must consult the president on that matter,
Okay.
So we're expected to deliver. But Parliament is also very different, I think, also from the executive. When you are in government, you tend to think that all the people do in Parliament is to sit there, wait for you to slip up, ask you questions. But there's a lot of work that goes into Parliament, especially at the level of the committees, which is where we have found our work. We realize that while we always speak and say our democracy is representative and participatory, to a large extent we've focused on the representative part, where people elect us, but they don't participate as much. So it's been very interesting being that voice. It's also obviously a different time. Being the government of national unity, where previous parliaments, previous chairpersons in my seat would have been leading ANC majority committee. The ANC no longer has the majority in the committee, and it's required us as members of the ANC to be very, firstly, I suppose, more thoughtful, more. How do I put this? You cannot ram anything through anymore. Not to say that we were, but we need to be more deliberate, more engaging. We need to win over people on the strength of our ideas, which I think, whereas in the past we would have assumed, that it will be taken. If not, these matters can come to a vote. We need to be a lot more consensus seeking. We've been very lucky in our committee. I doubt that we have really had any profound differences. And that's largely because I think all of us are focused on what needs to be done. And I do think that the primary agenda of the committee is really about ensuring meaningful connectivity for all. And that, I mean, you can unpack that for days, right? Whether it's around rural connectivity, whether it's about the cost to communicate, whether it's about the skills that are required for people to operate in the space. But also we've had to grapple, I think, with matters of transformation, which for a long time, I think over the last 30 years, they were a given. Now you've got other parties in government who perhaps do not share our outlook, on transformation and how transformation must be effected and entrenched. So grappling with these matters, but overall, it's been an interesting year. I think we've broken some barriers in terms of also bringing ICT into the mainstream, into the agenda, where there are conversations that are happening about what our digital future is supposed to look like. And just strengthening, I think, our collaboration with the department in delivering on those aspirations.
Great stuff. Talking about transformation, there's been a lot of debate around equity equivalent investment programs, which were recently gazetted by Minister Malesi. Other people were saying this is meant to favor, maybe if I can put that way, the companies such as Starlink, which has not obtained an operating license here in South Africa. What's your take on that?
Admire you say other people were saying, I am part of other people.
Okay.
So we did feel strongly as a committee that the intended or proposed policy directives that Minister Malatsi had issued. If I'm not mistaken, it was in May, June of this year. We felt that those were designed with the sole intention of trying to accommodate Starlink's entry into the country. And let me tell you why. Firstly, the timing was very curious. I don't know if you remember that when he gazetted those proposed policy directives, it was immediately after the president had that infamous meeting at the White House. I think before the president's delegation had landed back in South Africa, we wake up to these proposed policy directives. And secondly, because equity equivalent investment programs are not an invention of Minister Malatsi. They have been there. They are used in a number of industries, such as the automotive industry. I know that some of the OEMs in our sector use them. If I'm not mistaken, the likes of even companies such as Microsoft and Amazon have got equity equivalent investment programs, the EEIPs. So what was a burning issue and what remains a burning issue is a single operator called Starlink that does not want to comply with the laws of the Republic. And in this case, I'm referring specifically to the Electronic Communications Act. Now, the ECA is the overriding legislation in the sector that Starlink wants to operate. And even though BEE is another set of legislation where you want to get a license to be able to operate satellite services used for communication, you need to get a license through the ECA. And the ECA is prescriptive that you may not have less than 30% historically disadvantaged groups holding equity in that company. Now, we think that it's very disingenuous for Minister Malatsi to now want to come and say he wants to harmonize the laws. That's the word that he used. And our question was, he used alignment. What is alignment? And what authority do you as a minister have to align laws? Because if it's an interpretation issue, this is where the separation of powers comes in. So if it's an interpretation issue, you approach the courts and say, I don't understand how to read this law. For whatever reason you feel that that must be interpreted, the courts will do that. However, if you think that there is something wrong with the ECA and it must be changed to align with BEE, then you go to Parliament, because that's the role of Parliament, to amend legislation. Now, we're not saying we're opposed to EEIPs. We're saying that the law as it currently stands must be implemented. And if Minister Malatsi wants to then do away with the 30% in the ECA, then he should follow the correct route and come to Parliament to change laws. We are very resolute that we cannot have our sovereignty being undermined in this manner by a single company. And I keep emphasizing, Mr. Moyo, a single company, because as well as the rest of us do, that there are a number of other companies that have low Earth orbit capabilities, many of them that are testing in South Africa. Amazon with Vodacom, I think Project Caper, they call it. We know that Link Global just recently conducted tests with MTN in the Northwest, and many others. I think Telkom is also speaking to the Chinese. Now, you don't have any of those companies coming to us and saying the 30% equity shareholding is a problem. Hence, we believe that as the minister looks at the submissions, I know he said he's got 19,000 submissions on his desk. He needs to always remember that he cannot act ultra vires. He has to act within the law. And if the ECA must be changed, then that's the conversation we'll need to have at that particular time.
Awesome. So what's the way forward now?
On this issue?
Yes.
Well, we're hoping that we've seen that Starlink seems to have been busy on a PR campaign in the country. And we're hoping that perhaps they're going to look at working with some companies that are already compliant. For example, the likes of our MNOs in other parts of the continent they are working with. I believe that they're in a partnership with MTN in Zambia. But outside of our MNOs, there's about 490 other people who have licenses, which means that they comply with the 30% BEE. For us, it's important not only because it's a matter of transformation, Maya, but it's also because there are sensitivities and I suppose security concerns when you consider a Starlink. I do not know whether South Africans would be completely comfortable, and maybe this is something we may have to test, with a company that's known to have military capabilities in the US, very close to the US defense and security apparatus, having unmitigated access to our data, having unmitigated access to our information in the way that it's proposed. But I mean, that's a conversation I suppose the security cluster would have. Us as the component dealing with digital technologies, we're worried about the law being implemented in full. And we're also going to take a keen look at whether indeed the myth that is created about Starlink being a panacea to our rural connectivity challenges is true, right? Because in some of our neighboring countries, they've already deployed there. We're hearing about, quite steep prices that are a startup, if you may, in order to get the receiver transponder. I don't know what they call it, but also where the monthly costs range anywhere between 500 and 800 rand. Now, that may work maybe for farmers, commercial farmers who don't have access to connectivity, but our biggest problem is the rural poor, and I'm not sure if those prices are necessarily affordable. And this is not just a Starlink question. I suppose for anybody who wants to deploy LEO capabilities, we're going to have those discussions. But one thing I do want to say is that we are fully embracive of technology. We are right there behind innovation. And as I said right at the beginning, meaningful connectivity for everybody is our ultimate goal. And we are open to anything that is going to be able to bring that while still respecting the laws of the Republic.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Looking at rural connectivity, government has got projects like SA Connect, which has not really taken off as we have expected. So what is government doing, since we don't have the likes of Starlink at the moment, to drive that connectivity to the underserviced areas like our rural communities?
I think the objective behind the SA Connect program is noble. They started off a couple of years ago with phase one. If my numbers stand me correct, they've connected something in the region of about 971 government premises. I think they said more than 1 million households. We've gone and done oversight on some of these projects, and you can see obviously the difference that it makes, but there's also challenges with SA Connect. One of the key ones that worries us as Parliament is duplication.
Okay.
Where you see a number of entities, whether it is Broadband Infraco, whether it is Centec, whether it is a CETA, all deploying in one area. I mean, it was ridiculous. One institution we went to, and you look and you see there's a router there, 2 routers. One is run by BBI, one by Centec, I think. One is not even working. And you ask, how does this happen? And it's because there's a lack of proper coordination and alignment in terms of how they work. But over and above the entities in the portfolio, you also have wastage and again a sense of duplication in our view when you look at even the non-ICT SOEs. Eskom has got a lot of fiber that's been laid out throughout the country. Sanral, Prasa, amongst others. And arguably, we believe that if you were to tap into those, which you are supposed to do anyway in terms of law, if you read the BBI Act, where the Transnet and the Eskom fiber were supposed to be utilized by the State Digital Infrastructure Company to assist us with rural connectivity. So we think that that wastage and duplication must be eliminated in that program. But secondly, the quality of the service. I mean, in this day and age, to be rolling out 5 megabits per second, and that is what policy says as a minimum, then you're told, no, we can ramp up to 10, maybe 100. I'm not sure. And then with SA Connect, you then have to consider the universal service obligations, right, that the mobile network operators are supposed to have, which are supposed to enhance rural connectivity. You go to the schools. You come into a school and you find that, again, it's the same thing. A router is placed in a school and then it said that school is connected. Same speeds, and then it's in the admin block. But when we called them in Parliament and asked, then we told, no, that school has been connected. Connection must be meaningful. It must be reliable. It must be accessible. There's no young person that today should not have access to information digitally because they don't have internet access. They cannot afford the device. They cannot afford data. And this is what we're raising. So like maybe right where I started, that I think it's a noble objective. I'm not sure how it's implemented. What we are going to have to do, at least what government is going to have to do, is to also reconsider the use of the Universal Access Fund. Is it being utilized optimally? Can we do this better in terms of rolling out? I mean, we'll continue to support SA Connect. I don't know, though, because now I'm hearing that Treasury has taken a decision perhaps to not release some of those funds at this point in time. But I think that's a conversation we'll have with government in order to better understand it.
Interesting. Also, maybe recently, I think the Competition Commission approved the major deal between Vodacom and Massive. Do you think this will have an impact in addressing some of those connectivity issues in the rural areas?
Well, I don't know, because I really have not immersed myself in the details of that transaction. I know that we supported the transaction largely because we were opposed to an approach to competition in this day and age that does not recognize that consolidation is a global phenomenon. You look at just our industry, and I think we need to have a conversation about how we approach competition. I do not see how it is possible for us to create many new Vodacoms or many new dark fiber Africa. And where there's a move towards consolidation, we need to look at the effect of that on competition. And then we need to look at the entire value chain and say, how do you bring in black players? How do you bring in SMMEs into the value chain? But my understanding is that there's a number of commitments that they have made. If you were to ask me, my personal view, I think that we should be making greater use of Telkom.
Okay.
Telkom arguably has got the largest network across the country. They've replaced many of their copper. Uh, their copper lines. They've got a huge rollout with the OpenServe, also taking a very strong posture towards the rural areas. And I would want government's resources to go to building on that type of approach. And I mean, there's lots of conversations that we're having. I spoke to you about Eskom and Transnet, where we invited them to Parliament with the intention of ensuring that we're able to leverage the significant assets that we have. We have ongoing conversations with Telkom in this regard. But we're also pushing the minister to understand what is happening with the State Digital Infrastructure Company. Because if that SDIC was to come on board and ICASA releases to it the spectrum that we have been pushing that it's released to the SDIC, then I think you'll see improvement in leaps and bounds in that area.
Thank you, Chairperson. Earlier, you mentioned something like the SOEs that fall within the department. Some of them have had some challenges, like I can think of CETA. They've been like government departments such as Home Affairs saying they need to be allowed to procure their own ICT services. Some with even leadership instabilities within the SOEs. How have you found some of the SOEs, like the biggest challenges that they are facing, and some that are actually doing well, if you can?
Yeah, Mr. Moyo, I did say that connectivity was one of our priorities, but I think the second priority or a major priority of ours is obviously the governance, stability, and funding of the portfolio, or should I say the lack of adequate funding for the portfolio. So we spend a lot of time on governance matters. Maybe let me start with the funding issue. One of the portfolios that we oversee is the South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC. On an annual basis, National Treasury allocates in the region of about 190 million, let's be generous and say 200 million, to the SABC. It's expected to run the biggest public broadcasting service on the continent, at least 19 radio stations, 4 television stations across all languages, all official languages. It's no small feat. Now, somebody can argue, yeah, but they've done it before and they've been profitable for before. It was a different time. They did not have the competition that they currently have, where you have your streaming services, other platforms eating into the advertising revenue base of the SABC, and that's a challenge. But secondly, the SABC was not faced with the impact as it is now of the analog switch off, where they've literally bled audiences. So their numbers have dropped, which obviously has an impact on their advertising. But we are confident in the new leadership of the SABC. However, we do think that they require support, especially financial support. Now, we all accept that the TV license regime has failed. I mean, you've got an avoidance rate there in excess of 80%, where people are just not paying for their TV licenses, which is a conversation for another day. But it's one of the reasons why we're pushing the minister on the finalization of the SABC bill, but also on the funding model of the SABC. Whether they come with an option of introducing a household levy, let's have that conversations with South Africans. Whether it is about directly funding the SABC from the fiscus, many other companies are doing it. The BBC, for example, in the United Kingdom is funded directly from the fiscus. So we have a problem of funding. Then we have a problem of entities that have not managed to evolve with the times. The South African Post Office, the SABC and the Post Office, by the way, are the closest to my heart, because I think that they're also the closest to the people, you know. The Post Office failed to anticipate and adopt the challenges, the changes that were happening in that environment. Now, it's still got a huge role to play, especially in underserviced communities. It's still got a huge footprint in excess of 640 branches across the country. And many people, especially in the rural areas, look to the post office for service. But there's opportunities that they're not taking up. I mean, you have a courier servicing industry in this country that's in excess of 3.5 billion rand per annum. Just PEP stores alone moves in excess of 30,000 parcels per day. You know, that is the market of the post office. So we are hoping that it's going to exit the business rescue process quite soon. We are hoping that they're going to utilize the huge digital technology infrastructure that they already have in those post offices. All of them are fiber enabled, to be able to evolve, become ICT hubs, become training centers for young people, take up opportunities in e-commerce, last mile delivery and things like that. But I digress. I'm going on it.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But there's also entities that I think we should be extremely proud of the work that they're doing, like our signal distributor, Centec.
Okay.
I mean, Centec in their last annual financial statements showed a healthy balance sheet. They are working very hard to diversify their offerings, moving away from one big client, which is the SABC, and which you can imagine puts them at a huge risk that if the SABC is to collapse in any way, it impacts directly on Centec. They've been the lead drivers, obviously led by the department in developing the National Satellite for Communication Strategy, working together with the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. And for us, we believe that that's really important, that as we speak about the satellite technology, South Africa does not even own our own satellite. I mean, we're using foreign-owned satellites, and we think that given the opportunity, the DCDT, the Department of Comms, as well as the Departments of Science, should really be looking at how we build sovereign capacity in that regard. CETA is an interesting one, and I think a subject of much discussion between us and the minister. And it goes back to what I had said right when we were having the Starlink discussion. Nobody is going to stand in the way of the minister running his portfolio the way that he sees fit, but he needs to do that within the ambit of the law. Now, the CETA Act is very prescriptive that the State Information Technology Agency is the government, is procurement agency on matters of ICT. This does not mean that it has been without its own challenges over the years. It doesn't mean that it has not had leadership instability. I mean, as I sit talking to you now, there's no board at CETA, no permanent board. There's no permanent managing director since the beginning of the year. But we're saying this is an opportunity for the minister, for him to start in with a new leadership and fix things. He must do the work and not want to take shortcuts. So, it's very unfortunate that he has put in regulations that allow departments to go out of CETA and procure their own services. And we're hoping that he's going to look at this as a time-bound process where he builds the necessary capabilities within CETA to be able to close that gap. People have asked us, why do you want to centralize? Because that is the reason why CETA was funded, to ensure that we're able to leverage economies of scale. When we talk about the digitalization of government services, it can't be a decentralized approach where everybody does as they please. I have yet to see, and I know that I've been challenged when I say this, but I've yet to see a serious organization that allows its various entities or subsidiaries to run whatever systems that they want because they prefer those systems. We need to have a single coherent strategy, ICT strategy, across government that is led at the center. Procurement is not fundamental for me, right? But it's the extent to which the CETA is able to direct what is happening across government. The presidency just recently launched the Digital Transformation Roadmap. I read that report and I made a call to the Director General to say, where are you as the DCDT in this? I'm not seeing the role, for example, of the post office, of the post bank, which is supposed to be our state bank once licensed. Where's the role of the post bank in driving the digital payment services of the country? Then you look at the digital ID. Home Affairs must play an important role with that, but so must CETA. Now, presidency has created something else that's called the Digital Services Unit. We don't know what the institutional makeup of that is. And again, it's fragmenting, which we know is going to lead to duplication, which is going to lead to a wastage of resources and nothing gets done. So we continue to engage government on these issues. But overall, the key issues around governance stability is funding. You look at the regulator, ICASA. Why are we not being creative around the funding of ICASA? Maybe taking lessons from other countries. Why would ICASA not be allowed to retain a portion of the amounts that they generate and hand over to the fiscus to make them effective? We complain about quality of service. They don't even have the equipment to ensure that they are able to test quality of service effectively. They literally drive around towns holding up cell phones. In this day and age, that is ridiculous. But we have a huge problem of what do I call this? It's not just online harms, but internet governance, right? And you would think that ICASA and the other regulatory bodies, we would be seeing now that it's the time to fund them adequately. And this is not us going to National Treasury with a begging bowl. We're saying, can we be creative in approach on how we look at the funding of the portfolio?
Awesome. Thank you, Chairperson. Maybe just to go back to CETA, you mentioned that there's no board at the moment. Like, why has this taken so long? Like, what's so difficult with appointing a board at a critical institution like CETA?
You are asking the wrong person, but I will ask the question on your behalf.
Okay.
No, but what we are aware of is that there is an interim board, which is led by the extremely capable interim chairperson, Sedzani Mudau, who was the chairperson of Centec. She's working together today with senior officials from government. The board of CETA was advertised in January, if I'm not mistaken. Why to date that process has not yet been completed, I truly cannot answer for government in that regard. We are worried that we have seen the MD position, for example, advertised 3 times now. And again, there's been no explanation, I suppose, forthcoming from government. But I do think it's issues that must be raised. Similarly, at the post office, that board would have been advertised also earlier this month in March, if I'm not mistaken. And we do get intolerant. I think Mr. Moyo, on these issues, because when we were given a task for the statutory appointments, like the councils of ECASA, we put everything aside and we said, this is important, let's get it done. And I think in less than 3 months, we had recommended to the National Assembly the candidates to be appointed. So we don't think it's impossible. We hope that the minister is giving the necessary attention to it, and that this matter will be resolved as soon as possible.
Awesome. And I don't know if you are the right person to ask this. You also mentioned the state digital infrastructure company. Like, what's also holding this back? I understand it will be a merger between Broadband Infraco and, is it ICASA?
It was supposed to be Centec and Broadband Infraco.
Yes.
We have engaged as Parliament with government a number of times on this issue. And firstly, it was about how you structure this merger. But you must remember also the genesis of the SDIC would have come from the presidential process to rationalize state-owned enterprises. I'm hoping it was more than just the need to rationalize state-owned enterprises because we have too many, but in order to build something that we really require. And we do agree with the thinking around the SDIC. Now, Broadband Infraco is not as financially stable as I think we would like it to be, which is why then the merger seemed to have hit some problems there with Centec, because you would not want then Centec to acquire an assets that it may have problems with in the future. So I do think that they are trying to work that out in the meantime, but it doesn't mean that we do not have an SDIC. Because if you go through the Broadband Infraco Act, in fact, it makes it out to be that the BBI is actually the SDIC. And I think that a lot of the expectations that we have at the SDIC, they don't have to wait for a merger. The merger is a corporate firm, a corporate form, sorry. But what is most important is that what did we set out to do? So this consolidation of fiber assets that I was talking about, I think we need to proceed. We need to have a conversation about data centers, right? Firstly, on issues of regulation. I mean, I know we haven't spoken about legislation, regulation, and all of that, but where do our data centers reside? Centec is building capacity of data centers. CETA has got data center capacity. I think BBI, I stand to be corrected, is also looking at that. Again, duplication, scope creep. Let's be very clear. What is the responsibility of the SDIC, and how do the different entities leverage off the strengths that they have? You have a Centec that's sitting with 2 licenses. They don't need both. BBI is supposed to be the lead on the rollout of the SA Connect program. They don't even have a license. I mean, yeah, so we're hoping that we're going to see some movement around the SDIC. I know that recently government was engaging on the recommendations that were coming from the presidency around rationalization in the state of our SOEs. So we're looking to see what comes out of that and what that looks like.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Chairperson. Just to move away slightly, we are on a podcast now. There've been like some complaints of late, like, and people were saying podcasts need to be regulated. Do you think what we are doing now needs to be regulated?
That's the first time I've been asked like that, and my answer is yes. No. So what we're going to be doing as a portfolio committee, I did make reference to the fact that we are looking at our own legislative agenda. We have come to the realization that we cannot sit and wait for government. I mean, the legislation in our environment is outdated. It's archaic, let alone outdated. The Broadcasting Act, the ECA, even the MDDA Act needs revision. The CETA Act needs revision. So we are defining for ourselves, and this is going to be discussed at the strategic planning workshop that I mentioned yesterday. Where is it that we're going to focus in Parliament in terms of amendments? Now, one of the gaps that exists is obviously the regulation of the over-the-top services, the OTTs.
Okay.
We don't have any legislation that governs, firstly, entry into our market. We don't have, I mean, Mr. Moyo, if you can find X, please, give me a plug, because we don't know where to find them. They've got no presence in the country.
Yeah.
Some don't even pay taxes. I mean, I don't want to mention names here, but there's monies that we pay to these platforms, and immediately they go out of the country. They don't have. For example, the same obligations that we put on, whether it's the MNOs, I mean, regulatory parity, whether you're speaking about Starlink or you're speaking about over-the-top services, is very important. You have streaming services, your on-demand video services. We've had lots of engagement with Netflix in this regard, where they would speak to us about what they're doing in the country, but we can't operate on goodwill, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of money that's been invested into these networks that they're utilizing, and maybe we must look at what those obligations look like. So we're going to debate amongst ourselves legislation that is going to govern the operation of the OTTs, and we'll obviously look to the department, to the regulator, to look at what that regulation should look like. Our view, though, when it comes to podcasts is, firstly, we must update the ECA. Firstly, just to recognize that there is electronic media, there are podcasts which form part of, in our view, the broader broadcasting suite of services that are out there. I mean, the ECA only speaks about community, commercial, and public broadcasting. So online broadcasting is an issue. In terms of existing regulation, it's largely focused on the classification of content through the Film and Publication Board. So they would do, age restrictions, that content that's there. But nobody is looking at what these platforms firstly carry, right? So for us, platform accountability is important. You can't have X and TikTok and all those platforms being used to propagate misinformation like it's happening now. And misinformation is a big thing. We believe that it is one of the biggest threats to democracy, not only in South Africa, but across the world. You have countries in the world that have gone so far as to say you cannot register on online platforms using pseudonyms. That doesn't mean that we have a problem with freedom of speech. Speak as much as you like, right? Why would you have a problem with being known that these are your views if you yourself believe so much in freedom of speech? We have a constitution that protects all of us, right? We're not those countries where they say we can guarantee you freedom of speech, but we can't guarantee you freedom after speech. We are not like that. And as long as you are not inciting violence, you are not propagating hatred, you can say anything that you want. And we're hoping people are going to take responsibility. But we've seen how these podcasts are also used for cyberbullying.
Yes.
I mean, I don't even need to make examples, So the platforms need to be accountable for what happens. And there's podcasts, for example, that would have migrated onto the regulated platforms, whether it's MultiChoice. I think SABC was once in discussions on taking some of those podcasts. The minute they move there, they're also operating in a regulated environment. And that's where we expect things like the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa to be able to kick in. But where they are sitting elsewhere, they need to have a code of ethics, a code of practice, whatever you want to call. This is not us gagging anybody, and I want to maintain this, because if we agree on what is acceptable, right? Is profanity something that we think we must guard in this country? Is misogyny something that we think that we must guard in this country? Where they agree on speaking the truth, it was not government who developed the press code. It's not government who developed the code of practice of the BCCS SA. We have co-regulation, we have self-regulation, and I think that industry maybe must be looking at even having those conversations amongst themselves without expecting government to be pushing it. My last point on this is that I'm glad that the policy paper that's out for comment on the audio and audiovisual services is speaking about consideration of an ombud system as well. Because who do you complain to? I mean, people are bullied on a daily basis. There's misinformation. Nobody takes responsibility. It can't be the wild, wild west out there, you know? When these platforms, so many people go to them, whether it's for information, whether it's for educational purposes. So we're saying let's bring it into the ambit of responsible citizenry, and in the process also safeguard our democracy. And we're really looking into the issues of misinformation, disinformation. I mean, you remember the whole issue around white genocide in this country. We don't want to criminalize free speech, but let's deal with these information disorders. I think somebody called them digital deception the other day. Let's deal with them effectively and ensure that we've got the legislative instruments at our disposal to do that.
Awesome. I was also reading like countries like Australia looking at our kids. They're actually banning children of a certain age from being on social media platforms. As a lawmaker here in SA, do you think it's something that you can also consider doing?
I want to see what my kids think.
Yeah.
No,
My daughter was actually saying when I was talking, why is it that everything is now just being blamed on social media as if there's nothing else that we can talk about?
No, I don't know. I don't think the conversation has arisen in our parliament to date about age restrictions on social media. I think that social media, like any other platform, before that it was television, before that it was radio, it really is up to the parents, the caregivers, to what is the word I'm looking for? Monitor, manage what it is that their children are exposed to. Obviously, the regulators, like FPB, will continue to assist in that process in terms of classification of content. But I do think that once we're able to ensure a level of regulation which should hopefully also instill self-management in a lot of these platforms as well as the content creators, then I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't have a steadfast opinion either way on age restrictions. I think that it's really families must play their role, and we can't expect that social media is going to raise my kids or government is going to raise my kids. I think a lot of parents of this generation are generally digital savvy, and schools, there's a role to play also, just in terms of digital literacy. Online and cyberbullying, we need to ensure that that's part of the curriculum. I mean, we've got a whole series of engagements that we want to have with our counterpart, the Portfolio Committee on Basic Education, around protecting kids on digital platforms. But yeah, it was interesting to have that debate. Yeah.
And also like these laws like the ECA.
Yeah.
I think maybe some of our laws have been overtaken by the rapid pace at which technology is changing. What can we do to ensure that our laws are always, I know it's quite difficult for them to be at par with the rate of technology advancement, but I'm sure like you have got something under your sleeve as lawmakers, like to try and catch up.
There's a young person who once said to me, why don't you just use AI to write these laws and policies for you and you keep up? Yeah. So I think ongoing research. I think the international collaboration, our participation in global bodies also goes a long way just to see where the trends are going. But also a move towards collaborative lawmaking and policy development. And what I mean by that is not the department or even parliament sitting wherever we sit and assume we know, right? Because the changes are happening so fast. I'm keen to see what we are going to do, for example, on the ECA when it comes to issues of the consolidation of technology. I mean, you're sitting today where you have retailers being MNOs.
Yeah.
MNOs are banks, banks are retailers and MNOs. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's the most interesting thing. But as Parliament and as government, we're not really in the coal face of that. So I think collaborative lawmaking as well as policy development is going to be important. One of the things that I've constantly been calling for is a co-created national vision for the industry that is driven by both the lawmakers, government, public sector, civil society. Because I think that until we all agree where we want to go, the laws are not going to keep up, right? Um, you're not going to have private sector that's able to come to a party in a manner that makes sense. If I can just make an example, we laud everything that is being done by their corporate social investment arms,
Mm.
but it's disparate efforts that are not really contributing to the broader goal, or they are not big enough because they are disparate to make an impact.
Okay.
But if we all knew that this is where we're going, let's pool our resources and work towards a common aim, or at least a common future, then it's able to work. You were talking about rolling out this digital public infrastructure, digital ID, and everything. I'm like, where when we don't even have the connectivity that we require? So if we were able to sit together as an industry, bringing all players and agree about what we want to go, then I don't think that it's going to be a problem for us to make sure that the legislative, regulatory, and policy environment is up to date and keeps up. For our part, as Parliament, we have no problem on making amendments which are driven by the sector. I mean, just on the SABC bill, where we were saying to the minister, you don't need to take this thing out of Parliament and waste another 2-3 years. We are already so many months down the line. We've gone out on public hearings. We have a sense of what needs to be changed. And that's our approach to lawmaking. So you speak to us on what makes sense for the sector. We'll speak to you on the politics and what we think that is going to drive us towards our socio-economic development goals. We'll find each other in the middle, you know. Maybe I'm simplifying it. I don't understand why it's so complicated. Because if you can then have that type of approach where we look at what makes sense from an investment point of view, from a competition point of view, from a socio-economic development point of view, we will. We may not win everything. Not everybody's going to win what they want, everything, but we'll find common ground that allows us then to move quicker on a lot of these things. A lot of them stall. They stall because of interest. I mean, tell me why we have not yet sunset 2G and 3G. There's views out there that no, because those handsets still move the quickest. There's profit motives. We engaged with the MNOs on this when we called them to Parliament, and they said, no, that can't be the reason. I mean, they've gone out, they're bringing in cheaper devices and so forth. But you could find that for years this thing has been stalling because there's interests that are being protected. So let's put our interests on the table. Let's say, you want to make profit. We want you to make profit because you're going to create more jobs. We want our economy to thrive, but we want you to don't leave people behind, So how does this work for all of us? I mean, there's many issues that we can raise in that regard. But we are going to be doing our best, as I'm saying that our primary mandate is lawmaking. So that is exactly what we intend to do, especially in the sector that has these huge policy, law, and regulatory vacuums.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chairperson. Maybe lastly, what would you want to be remembered for as the Chairperson of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies?
Well, I would really wish to be remembered for having worked and led a group of men and women in the Portfolio Committee who are passionate about ensuring that our rural areas are connected. We are tired of people saying, no, there's no network, or you must go on top of the roof in order to get network, because we truly believe that access to connectivity is right up there on your human rights, just behind water, electricity, and so forth. Because we know that access to the digital world is really the critical enabler that we need for this economy to be revived. So if we can get a gadget in every young person's phone and connect that gadget to the outside world, then we would have done our jobs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chairperson, for coming to our studio. We could have spoken forever, but I know you are pressed for time. Yeah, but yeah, thank you so much once again for coming to our studio. It was really a pleasure talking to you, and all the best with your committee.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I hope this is not the last time I'm invited.
Definitely. There's still,
Yeah.
many issues coming up. Technology is changing on a daily basis. So I'm sure your department is the one that is, always having to come up with new ideas because the industry is changing a lot. Like we didn't
At a
have
rapid pace.
ChatGPT maybe 2-3 years
True.
ago. Now it's
True. We haven't had the whole conversation around, firstly, just unpacking the PC4IR again, that Presidential Commission report us through,
yes,
and then look at artificial intelligence.
yes,
Whether you want to look at it or not, it's already here. It's taken
exactly.
over, and what are we doing in terms of getting it, in society? How? Yeah. So there's a lot to talk about.
So I'm sure you will come back again, definitely.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moyo, for having me here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for watching this episode of ITWeb TV. Today we're talking to Khusela Sangoni-Diko, who is the chairperson of the Parliamentary Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and thank you so much for watching.